Good evening and welcome to another NTX LiveStream. Tonight I'm going to do another Q&A. I pause when I said Q&A because I've got a couple of points to make about what things that people have mentioned since last week's blackout video that I did. Okay, so a couple of news updates. The app is coming on leaps and bounds. We were hoping to get it out this week, but B, the designer, said she couldn't stand it any longer. She was just going to have to bring forward the colour redesign. I mean, like massive amounts of work. She said, no, I'm going to do it. So she's done it and it looks incredible and it works. So thanks, B, for the looks, and it works brilliantly. So thanks, Marius, for it working. So it'll be out in the next couple of weeks, but I'll keep you posted on that. So interestingly, the app came from the live sessions that we've been doing and is an answer to many questions that I've had. For instance, Julian asked a while ago on one of the videos that, or Julienne said that they turn because of breath hold. So what's the best way to train without pushing or without, kind of just going through lots of pain? Breath hold. And I said, and I still say, that stressed breath holds are the way forwards. So sitting on the sofa holding your breath, they're called unstressed breath holds, and they have certain levels of merit. But realistically, when you are doing a dive, you're going to be stressed. So you want to replicate that by doing stressed breath holds. So stressed breath holds are where you're active, generating a lot of carbon dioxide, burning a lot of oxygen, but mostly CO2 is the thing that makes you want to turn. So that's what you want to be kind of building up. So it's really easy to do stress breath holds. In essence, if you ran around the block as fast as you could and then sat down and held your breath, it would be insanely difficult because you've built up a lot of CO2 and literally when you sit down, your body can't get rid of the CO2. It's got massive amounts of CO2, and so that's how you hold your breath with massive CO2 in the body, and that kind of build up your tolerance. So it's pretty simple to do CO2 tolerance training. And the reason I answer this question first is because the app has got several tables on it, which or not tables, exercises. Tables are, kind of a variation on a theme, but effectively on the app there's exercises that you can do that are stressed breath hold exercises. And my advice is to do a short session, so little sessions, but do them often. So, 15-minute, 20-minute sessions is optimum. There are advantages of doing like really short micro sessions, like the lazy tables, which you can do in 5-10 minutes. But realistically, the shock factor is still present for like 15-20 minutes. And when I mean shock factor is your body is kind of happy doing its daily thing, and then bam, you do something out of the ordinary, hold your breath, do a CO2 turbo, and the body kind of, whoa, what the heck was that? And that's how adaptation happens. If you do a long soft breathe up and acclimatize the body, that's what you want to do at the end when you actually do a dive, on holiday or a film shoot or whatever it is. But for training, you want the shock factor. So you're doing everything, everyday normal things, and then bam, you do a CO2 hold or a couple of CO2 holds. And that's where adaptation happens, when you shock the body to go, whoa, what's that? And then it adapts. So especially with dry training, it's safe to do it like that, and you can do it in, say, 20 minutes. and doing it often. So little and often. Little and often stressed breath holds. That's what I'd say to increase as a simplification of what you want to do to increase your breath holds. Okay, so the title of the video is Signs of Blackouts, and there's a couple of questions about that, but equally well, somebody sent me today, in fact it was released today, a video about Thibault's blackout that he suffered, I think he said 2019 in Kalamata, and he was saying, so it's a video out on YouTube, you can watch it. I'm not going to play it here. There's no merit in watching it again on my channel. You can watch it if you want. And he released this video, pretty much the entire dive, and he's talking about the blackout, and he says he's doing it to kind of unmystify it and be open about it, which is he's a nice guy, and he's got good he's a good diver and a nice guy, and that's a really good idea to have, to kind of talk about these things. My issues with the video are there's a couple of issues with the video. The first is he's way too blasé. He's showing a video where he blacks out, and it's considered a deep blackout, but he's just talking about it like, these things happen and stuff. And this was quite shocking to me, because as far as I'm concerned, he died. He pushed himself so far, he died. He was at 30 meters, blacked out. He needed a rescue, and somebody there to not only get him up to the surface, but then to bring him round. That's big. That's massive. And for him to release this video where he's just chatting about it, and I had a blackout and this happened, I was just like, seriously? You died. You pushed yourself too far to death. So that's my first kind of issue with it. The second issue is he blames things. And as I said last week in my video, there is only one reason for blacking out. That's you've gone too deep, too long. That's it. No ifs or buts. And as soon as you put other things in the way, this happened, that happened, blah, 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 you're distracting yourself and other people from the fact that you dive too long, you dive too deep. Even with Guillaume, who's I consider a good friend of mine, and he had a big blackout a few years ago, where he was going for a world record, 129, and they set the depth to 139. Okay, I mean it's a world championship set up and a world record set up, and they misread the line length, and he blacked out. Now he could, obviously the reason he blacked out was because the rope was 10 meters longer than it should have been. But the fundamental thing is he dived too long and too deep. That's why he blacked out. The reason that he dived too long and too deep is because they set the rope wrong. True. But you can't escape the fact that he dived on that day too long and too deep, too long. It wasn't his fault that he dived too deep and too long, but it still was the fact. So going back to the video that Thibault released today, where he says that he had low potassium and thermocline, and this affected him this way, this affected him that way. Yeah, you dived too long, too deep that day. That comes down to awareness. Now, if you were unaware that you had low potassium, that's still awareness, and that's still you not knowing about yourself. Personally, I think if you, kind of are diving so close to the line where not having a banana that day which bananas insanely high in potassium. Not having banana, you die. Having a banana, you make the dive. Personally, I think you're way too close to the line. And I say this because he said about supplements and minerals in the body. So, I mean, if somebody's told him he needs supplements, potassium gets absorbed from bananas really, really well, a lot better than from a supplement. So, you've got to think about the fact that if you're doing a sport where you miss a banana break and you literally die, you kill yourself. That's way too close to the line for me. That's a sketchy situation you're in there. But I say, you watch the video, you can watch it if you want. He does go on about blaming this and the thermocline and that, and you dive too deep too long. You weren't aware that was too deep and too long. That's your fault. And then he talks about, knowing these things and medical checkups and etc., etc. Yeah, but that's still awareness. And if you weren't aware, you should be aware. Enough said. Lovely guy, and usually a really good diver. Okay, so going back to the Q&A. So, following on from this, Jean or Jean, I don't know which, doesn't say. They asked after last week's, how could I tell? So at 17 minutes in the video last week, 17 minutes in, I said World Championships, and I saw somebody diving, and I could see they were going to black out. Could see it from 25 meters away. I was standing on the side, and I kind of turned away, took my divers away, said, "You don't need to see this." And Jean has asked, how could I tell from that distance away? And I think the before I answer that, the point I was making wasn't the fact that wow, I could tell, aren't I good? It was more that I could tell really easily from 25 meters away. And I don't blame the safety divers. They were on the surface. They're not allowed to touch people until they actually black out. So you see the signs. They can't do anything. So they didn't grab him too late or anything. But my point was that after the dive, the diver was going around saying to everybody, quite openly, quite happy, saying, "Oh, there was no signs. There was no way. It just came on." And that was my point. The fact that I could see it 15 meters before they actually conked out, I could see it, and I was 25 meters away. I saw it on the turn. Means there were signs. So just going around telling people, "Oh, there's no signs," is just taking excusing yourself. I had no reason. How were I meant to know that I was going to black out? There was no signs, but there were. And this was my point, that there's always signs. There's always signs. And that doesn't do anybody any favours saying, I didn't, there wasn't any signs. The fact that your brain blocks out, 20 seconds before before a blackout, you forget that time doesn't help, but it's quite, there were signs. Saying there was signs is just a lie. So how can I tell? Well, if you've got to, it's all down to situation and knowledge and awareness. Hey, why don't I just say awareness? It's all about awareness. So if I'm on the side of a pool and I've got two newbies, or 5 newbies or whatever it is, and they're doing a dive, and one of them blows bubbles on, push off swimmer length, and they blow bubbles, I'm not going to jump in and rescue them. Okay? If we're at the World Championships and somebody's on their 8th length and they blow bubbles, I'm jumping in and rescuing them. So it's all about context. Blowing bubbles is a sign that somebody is losing consciousness. But if it's a newbie, loads of people blow bubbles, blow out when they're doing a diving when they're newbie. Right? So what do? We teach people not to blow out underwater because that causes confusion, or could cause confusion. But it's a good sign. It's not a good sign. It's a bad sign. It's a sign. Very easy to spot bad sign if somebody breathes out underwater. But equally well, if you're at the World Championships, like in the example that I was, and this is what Jean asked, how did I see it? You're at the World Championships. Again, there's some people at the World Championships whose technique isn't fantastic. But most people are pretty tight on their technique. They may not be no fins experts, and they're just entering. So there's a bit of leeway, but generally people at the World Championships are pretty tight on their technique. So seeing anything outside a tight, controlled technique, not good or bad, but controlled, is going to be a warning sign. So doing a turn and the foot slipping, it's unlikely to happen when you've got a diver of that at that sort of level. But the main thing you can see is just changing tempo, changing power, and so there's the first change in tempo, which is we call fids or fid. That kind of they start swimming and they go, oh man, I'm a bit deep, and they speed up, as opposed to closing their eyes and chilling and letting things take the course. They start to speed up. And in fact, I think if you watch the Thibault video, you see his arms are up, and there's just kind of rocking starts. And considering he's been to wherever he's been 100 meters, and the video starts at like 40 meters or something, and he starts rocking, then that's not a good depth for rocking to be happening. He's looking to stop finning at 20 meters or something. So he should be at a point where he's starting to cruise as opposed to rock. So there's so that's the kind of attitude you want to be looking at the dives. Realistically, if anything changes from the ordinary, and this comes, you have to know your diver. You know what your diver does, you know how your diver reacts, you know how, and then eventually, you know what to expect. Okay. So knowing your buddy, knowing their diver, anything out of the ordinary is not a good sign. Okay. Unless they say, oh, this one, I'm going to try a dive, I'm going to go down and I'm going to do a strange kick or something, which is, we've said this before, plan your dive, have an objective, and this was somebody else, somebody said, so Jackie said on the "What are you trying to do?" video, she said, I try and think about why before every dive, and this goes back to this. So why am I doing this dive? Well, I'm going to change my kick. So you turn to your buddy and say, I'm going to try and change my kick. So watch out for that, will you? Okay. Leading on from that, so that was how can you tell whether there's a blackout coming on, and it's never going to be a specific thing. It's going to be contextual. And then Ted asked, what a relaxation alarm bell. So this is way before the blackout. When are you losing your relaxation? Now, again, this is going to be contextual, and we're talking about signs and symptoms. I think he's talking about symptoms as in the feelings you have, the symptoms you have, as opposed to signs, which is what somebody else sees. So he says relaxation alarm bells, I like it. There's a certain amount of time in the water required so you can assess whether a situation or how you're feeling is brought on by the fact you're playing a silly game, or that you've been a hard dive, CO2. But again, this goes back to what we were saying before, that every dive has an objective. So if you're playing a silly game where there's lots of CO2 involved, that you've just, you're working hard before the dive, you should be ready for that feeling underwater. But equally well, you should be able to assess it and go, well, I've just, been swimming up and down. I've got a lot of CO2 in my body, so it's highly unlikely I'm going to black out. But it's going to be a really hard dive because there's loads of CO2 in my body. And the objective is CO2 training. So there's no point in pushing. Yeah, you're going to feel the CO2 build up. It's going to be a hard dive. But there's no point in pushing because the objective is to get used to the CO2. So it's much better to do a dive where the CO2, you feel the CO2, again, feel the CO2, and again, feel the CO2, as opposed to doing one long dive. Because the whole point is to get used to the high CO2. So in that case, the relaxation alarm bells will be something other than the CO2 buildup. You have your objectives, you know what's going to happen. Other relaxation alarm bells for me is when you find that you're not focused on you. Okay? So if you're looking towards the end of the pool, I can nearly make it, I can make this, or looking to a wreck or the tag, or if you're spearfishing, just waiting, come on, move in front of the spear gun. This is not being aware of yourself. And these are the points that you really need to check yourself. Eyes closed, go for a body check about relaxation. The trouble is, at these points where your awareness is taken away from yourself, it's really hard to know because you've been distracted. Catch 22. This is why you hear a lot of spearfishermen saying, I pulled the trigger and then went, oh, Struth, I've been here a long while. I've been here too long. Because they're so distracted, they weren't listening to the body. As soon as they pulled the trigger, there's nothing else they can do. They've either shot the fish or they haven't. And then, that's too long. So it's about the relaxation. Alarm bells can only be there if you are aware of yourself and your state of relaxation. Awareness. I think I should mention awareness more often. Yeah. Okay, so let's see if there's any questions come up. There's no top chats. Nobody's even said good night, good evening today. That's unusual. So one more question, a little bit easier, softer, shall I say, is Marius actually said, suffers from sinus squeeze. What's the best way to do that? Kind of deal with sinus squeeze, and realistically, the number one cause for sinus squeeze, if you get it regularly, not just one-off, but if you get it regularly, is lactose intolerance. Give up dairy 3-4 days before a dive or before you go away. Give it a go. It's free. It's easy. Give it a go, as opposed to popping drugs. The second is dehydration, and that's more one day by day as opposed to reoccurring. But necking bottles of water, it is a must if you're in a long dive session. Okay. The reason you're getting sinus squeeze is there's a blockage in the tiny little tubes that lead from the mouth and the nose into the sinuses above the eyes and below the eyes and behind the ears, etc., etc. And these are getting blocked up. Now, they're getting blocked up for a reason. Dehydration, sticky mucus, infection, etc., etc. If you've been on an aeroplane and your head didn't feel like it was going to explode, then they work. Air can go in and out of the sinuses. Okay, that's your catch-all. Okay, so they do work. Why are they not working when you're diving? Yeah. It can be tension, unlikely, because we're talking about tubes going through bone. So tension doesn't really play into it. Yeah, odd positions in the body might not help it, but realistically, sinus squeeze is going to be mucus based. So give up dairy, drink loads of water. Okay. Check for any infections. That's it, really. So thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully there's some questions answered there that help you. moving forward. As always, any questions, put them in the comments, and I generally do a Q&A every few weeks. So if you've got a good question, I'll answer it on one of the live streams. Apart from that, thank you very much for joining us, and I'll hopefully see you next week. Cheers. Bye. Oh, hang on, I've got to press